Well, thank you, everybody. I'm Jimmy McLaren. I'm the Maker Activity Coordinator, Assistant Deputy Chief Volunteer, and all sorts of other titles that make up for the fact that I'm an unpaid volunteer. I'm not a public speaker. This isn't a polished presentation, so just bear with us as we get through this. But I got wrapped into this because I'm also married to the greatest library director in Benzonia, and we have a good time together doing this great stuff. So we want to just kind of take you on, kind of like walk you through our journey in the last 2.5 years in our Maker adventure as a relatively new director and a group of volunteers who were kind of new to all of this and this new world of making. I just kind of want to share what we've learned and what we've done. That being said, there's a little bit of relevant history in the library and in our little town of Benzonia. Benzonia Public Library is a small historical rural library. There's no full-time librarians. Everybody puts their hours in and then puts in a lot of volunteer time. The village of Benzonia has a population of 500. The service area throughout Benzie County is larger, but that's our nuclear community. Benzonia was founded in the 1850s as an educational colony of some people that wanted to make an enlightened society in the wilderness, and this brought in this influx of liberal Christians, abolitionists, suffragettes, and later on Civil War vets coming up for their land grants and refuge in the wilderness. So we had this really great, wonderful, colorful history here. And the gem of this enlightened society, quote unquote, was the college that was opened in 1863, which later became a prep school in 1900, then eventually closed in 1918 with our involvement in World War I. The library has been in the only remaining building of the college for 90 years. It's the Mills Community House. The library is the tenant of the middle floor of this historical building. The upstairs is an auditorium, and the basement is a community space. And that's important for what we're going to talk about to some extent. So it won't be on the quiz, but it is relevant. So these last couple of years, we wanted to fill some need in the community. And even though there is this wonderful history and this pioneer spirit and relatively recent, pioneers in our area, these educators and visionaries, they bred generations of independent folks, a lot of artisans and craftsmen, creative and self-sufficient families. But then in the last couple of decades, we've had this decline. Young people and young families moving out, retirees moving in. We've lost a lot of manufacturing jobs, due to plant closures. Just kind of this thing that we're seeing all over the place. We're really just a resort area, a lot of service and construction jobs, a little bit of agriculture. There's not a really vibrant future for tech work. We're about 40 miles from Traverse City, 2 hours from Grand Rapids. And that's where the tech work goes. That's where a lot of our young families are kind of moving off to if they stay in northern Michigan area. So with all this, our school district is struggling. We have still very strong performance educationally in the school system due to the devoted teachers and real positive leadership. But last year we closed an elementary school in the district in the next town over, combining the majority of the county's elementary students into one school, which is conveniently a block away from the library. Same as most areas, there's not a lot of STEM focus. Teachers are struggling with what they have, the time they have in the classroom. There's not enough hands-on and not enough art, not enough music, just what a lot of places are seeing the same thing. There's not a lot of other opportunities for exposure, to STEM principles and hands-on stuff in the community. So that was that was obviously the thing that hit us. What can we do to help this? And really more importantly, the social and emotional side of this. We felt the obvious correlation of our economy and educational opportunities dwindling, and and the social issues that kind of come with that. Our children face what seems like a high level, maybe disproportionate level of our nation's social problems, abuse and neglect, and certainly a disproportionate high amount of drug use and overdoses. So we know we can empower kids, we can increase confidence. If nothing else, we can keep them busy, by getting them by getting them using their hands, learning skills, helping them understand and even have some control over their own physical world when everything else kind of seems, uncontrollable. If we can get some employability skills, that's great. Something of interest, hobbies, but really just to instill a sense of pride by showing them how to make things they can be proud of, and hopefully lifelong skills. And we know, if we influence our young population, in some way to just keep them out of trouble, make them less likely to follow some of these cycles. So that was a little longer-winded than I intended to be, but we'll get right into it. So this is just kind of like a timeline, a story. Benzonia Public Library, there's just a really low budget in terms of what we have to work with. So anything that we do here, you can definitely do it. We don't have a maker space. There's no dedicated full-time space, but we do have access to space. With the upper and lower levels of this building, we have pretty open access as long as it's scheduled well. So we learned amplifying with what you have, exploiting your strengths, and wrangling in community partners, and really we just maximize the impact with special programming versus the open makerspace model. So branding, we kind of came up with some logos and some images and some things to kind of help, kind of fuse the programming together, to kind of give some people that the visual cues and reminders. We had fun with this last time. Here it is again. This thing keeps popping up on flyers and billboards. And we jumped right in when we started 2.5 years ago, when we decided we wanted to kind of get on the maker bandwagon, with utilizing our already popular summer reading program. The summer reading program is doing well, and we just kind of modified it to a STEAM theme. And we were drawing in more and more attendees. We already had the volunteers. We already had the community support. We had sponsors from the local businesses for the prizes, and it was already going good. So we kind of looped this right into the maker concept. And before I go on, I just want to, we definitely, as libraries, we don't want to forget the A. I think, using STEAM instead of STEM, libraries need the arts and arts need the libraries. And most of us already have art programs, crafts, maybe music programs. Incorporate that into your maker mission. And also don't forget the S, the traditional sciences. We know that the traditional science disciplines can really become springboards into the rest. And so our summer reading program consists of puppet shows in which the puppets really explain kind of more traditional scientific principles. It could go on forever, but one thing I want to point out with this is that guy that's standing in the front of the room in the blue shirt. He's the recycling coordinator for the county, and we'll kind of talk about him later, so remember that guy. But we utilize all sorts of very inexpensive things for our crafts with our summer reading program. This summer reading program focus was on shelters throughout the world, and here on the table we have every single free thing that you could find in the woods, which the kids utilize to make their craft for the day, and a little bit of structural engineering involved, but for the most part it was just open fun. Also in this slide, you'll notice in the back left there's two Boy Scouts back there. There's another free resource in your community, very gifted young men who need service hours and are usually willing to help, so it's a great opportunity for some free volunteers. But here's our happy faces here with their fairy houses they built out of those materials. There's another summer reading program activity. They were doing some screen printing. Kind of a side note, these are our repurposeful librarians. This is two of the library's main librarians and super duper volunteers. They make, this is one of their booths at a local summer art show. They make all these crafts and works of art out of recycled materials completely on their own volunteer time. Sell them. 100% of the profit goes to the library's making programs. Just immensely talented people and just very devoted to the library and to the cause. And they not only donate money, but they donate their time to host maker programs, especially for adults. You know, a lot of focus on the kids, of course, but here we have an adult maker program. They were building lamps. This is a partner from a local hardware store who came in, donated his time, did a power tools demonstration and how to use power tools safely. And they made lamps by utilizing these recycled books, drilling holes through them and building the lamps on top. So they were using the power tools, they were doing the wiring, putting it all together. It was fantastic. And I want to point out, you know, keeping the adults happy is always a wonderful thing. Not only just to get the community involved and everybody kind of knowing what's going on at the library through this maker program and kind of this new concept, but there's also a couple donors to the library in this slide. So it's nice to keep those people happy and interested as well. One of the kind of very creative programs we did was Harry Potter Hogwarts Satellite Classroom event in the evening. It was a popular, very fun activity. We had a local, actually it's a volunteer at the library who is also a teacher at a private school. She's a science and math teacher, and she put together this program and curriculum that she uses in the classroom. It's chemistry and culinary using all household ingredients, and it's just an amazing event. They made all sorts of tasty dips and treats. They also made slimes and crazy chemical reactions, and in addition to the Harry Potter theme and the fun of the evening, she just did a brilliant job, you know, teaching the science that was going along with it. This brings us to August of 16. We were completely blown away and just so lucky to have this partnership kind of come along beside us and just kind of really gave us a boost into what we were doing, what we were trying to do. U of M stepped up and helped come into Benzonia and make some really exciting things happen. And we really are thankful for that, for Kristin and her team and everybody who's been involved over the last couple of years. So we had these maker fests, and later they were maker days, and there were just ways to expose the community to all sorts of fun, great things. Some things that were, you know, pretty new to the majority of Benzonia citizens, especially when you get into some of the robots and the 3D printing. Really, really fun events. In addition to the tech toys and the exposure to the technology, we did a lot of just very, you know, more traditional, hands-on. We did glass etching, some fabric work. Toy take-apart has always been a wonderful activity up here. Circuitry, Legos. We have great relationship with Legos in Benzonia. We're lucky enough to have a huge collection at our disposal to borrow, and it's always an easy thing. Ozobots, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So one of the main things that we really want to focus on is our partnerships with the school. We developed this really important symbiotic relationship with the school and with the huge number of kids that are at the elementary school next door. This has been just a really positive thing for everything we've done. So this is a slide of a behavior incentive day. Most schools do something like this or similar, I'm sure, or they would be interested if it was brought up to them. So it's like every marking period, kids who have had, you know, good behavior marks and haven't gotten any serious trouble get rewarded. And we're just pretty tickled that to be rewarded for good behavior is a trip to the library. And so we really take a lot of pride in that, and we try to put on a really fun, fun time for them. So we do all these different stations. There's a lot of hands-on crafts, very, very basic things that are very simple. We do, you know, some coloring and some, you know, kind of, you know, real traditional paper crafts. We do toy take apart where kids get to just jump right in and get into those electronics and see what's going on. We do kind of some things that we switch up different times. We do Legos, we do flashlight making, we've done some different textile arts. We have another community partner with Cognition, which is a science exploration center that came in on this particular one, and they ran a couple booths. And we saw, this particular day, I think we saw 260 students throughout the day. And again, you know, treating kids to a day in the library as a behavioral incentive is pretty fantastic. So this is another thing where, you know, we're lucky to have this huge space, but this could be done at any community space. This could be done in the school gymnasium. We've actually done one incentive day where we went into the school and used some free space and set up different stations. The kids traveled around to visit us at these different stations in the school. So this is something that, even though it's, you know, this particular model is a huge open space, it can be done in lots of different ways. We did a cardboard challenge, which was just a really exciting thing. You know, we really didn't know what to think of this when we got going with it, but we went back to that partnership with that guy in the blue shirt on one of those first slides, the county recycling coordinator. Kind of a side note, you know, here's a partner in our community who has, you know, the library may not have the biggest budget, but here's a partner who has a budget for community outreach, advertising. You know, he's got a little bit of his budget he has to spend on some of these things. So not only did he help haul some cardboard around and give us some direction, but he helped promote it. He helped pay for advertising in the newspaper and in the media. There's people like this around. If you can't afford to do everything on your own, you may find people in your local government or different agencies that have budget line items that they've got to burn up for these things. So our cardboard challenge came with a little free advertising too. There happened to be a parade for our Winter Fest the weekend before, so we got some free advertising for that. And it was just a great time. Just free cardboard manipulation and exploration, cutting and gluing and taping and just creating people, you know, kids came in, people of all ages, old grandpas and little grandkids, and it's just super easy, super cheap. Our annual holiday party, every year around Christmas time, we have this big community party. It's an existing program that already brings in a lot of people. So we brought these maker projects into that, you know, a way to make gifts, wrap gifts, make cards, you know, neat things that the kids are proud to give as gifts to mom and dad. And, you know, again, we're dealing with kids who don't have a lot of money. There's not a lot of, you know, retail places close by other than maybe a dollar store for, you know, for these things. So to make quality gifts that they're really proud of is a big deal, and we're happy to do that. And we don't have a slide for it, but I do want to mention this fall, Halloween time, we had a costume creation lab where kids were able to come in, and U of M helped out with that as well. And it was just a really great time. Kids just built costumes, were able to just kind of get in it, the material and all the accessories, and make some fantastic costumes, things that we're really proud to take home. We have so many other STEAM and maker activities, different crafts nights, and things that the repurposable librarians do, and they're making just really quality stuff that the kids are proud of and getting some great hands-on experience. And we're just not great photo takers, so we don't have the best collection to show you. We get excited in the moment, and we don't take all the pictures like we should. One of the last things I really want to touch on is the Benzie Guild of Makers. So this is, I guess, the closest thing to our makerspace model. The Guild of Makers is a student-led organization. They meet Wednesdays after school, every other Wednesday, and it is open makerspace in the fact that they can do what they want, as long as they're being creative, as long as they're making something. We make sure that they have the materials they need. We have, we've got a good pile of little bits, and we've got some basic electronics. But for the most part, they're on their own as far as coming up with what they want to do. We just make sure it's there for them to do it. We do some take apart stuff and explore, circuitry and motors and things. A group of kids spent several weeks taking apart a giant copy machine, getting out all the stepper motors and figuring out different ways to power them up. And, they're currently in a box waiting for the next project. But this is our Guild of Makers workbench. This is a locking cabinet that just gets kind of slid away when it's not being used on the Wednesday nights. Between this and a few shelves in a storage room, that's the maker space. It goes away and it all comes out, and the kids use it. They clean up, they put away, they organize all the tools and all their contraptions at the end of the day. So there's a nice sense of responsibility in that for them. They end up making a lot of games. They make a lot of, Rube Goldberg type things. We've had a lot of interest from the community. We've had some volunteers step up, say, hey, I'm interested in this. I'm a luthier. I'd love to come in and help the kids make some instruments and kind of understand some of that. And a few other people that with specific crafts or artisans that want to help out. So we're going to incorporate that into our programming this spring and into the next school year as we start back up. But again, it'll be optional. We want the kids to be able to explore and kind of have their own choice. The last thing I want to talk about is our school enrichment programs, in which Amanda, my wife, the director, and I have gone into the elementary school, and kids have been pulled from class time, usually last of the day, and they give us a classroom setting in which we just do some kind of fun science and maker programming with them, and it's a lot of fun. And so we have this Stanley folding step rolling awesome toolbox that we have. This was set up one day for a program on water quality, and we made water filters as a kind of a challenge. So that's, we haul that with us. So we go in with a PowerPoint type presentation. We kind of have a lot of fun with it. We talk about some sort of traditional science concept. And then at the end of it, we have a maker challenge in which all the kids are getting groups and they're given a designated amount of odds and ends of materials. This particular one was structural engineering. And we talked about structural engineering and then moved on. So this is kind of the slides from that. And there's a whole slide program is actually in what I sent to Ben. We're obviously not going to go through it. But, some of the branding, the kids remember what's going on, who's there to bring it to them, and instill some of the love of the library. And, of course, some self-deprecating photographs and some fun with it. But, really the thing that we've learned the most through this is, the effectiveness in the community through the maker movement, through these programs, is that the effectiveness is equal to the time invested, not the money invested. And we've set our groundwork. We've spent countless volunteer hours, and we've worked hard to kind of get this whole thing set up. And but now here we are. The community knows what we want to do. The kids know, and they expect fun things at the library. So I think really all in all, if you build it and you brand it and promote it and you create a stir in the community, the partners, the community partners, the businesses, the other agencies that may have some help and influence, they're going to be lubed up and ready to help. And I think that's a crucial thing to remember, to just find those partnerships and use them how you can to get things going. And once you got things going and the fun is showing everywhere, volunteers are going to show up. So be ready to delegate and be ready to figure out how to utilize individual skills where they're needed. And that's really our journey thus far. That's kind of 2.5 years in a half hour. So.
Thanks so much, Jimmy. Is there any other picture on the slide, or is it just you?
There you go. I'm sorry. Oh man. Yeah, that was a delay. Yeah. So that's me and Amanda, the partner in crime.
There were a couple of questions about the cart that you had a few slides back. Where did you get that, and how much was it? We thought it was Sam's Club for
the big one.
Yeah, the one that you took.
This was actually.
Oh no, I think the other one.
Oh, this one.
Yes.
No, this one was like $60.
Right?
Amazon. Yeah. It's also, I think they carry it at Menards. Keep it in stock at Menards as well.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's cool. It's a cool piece of equipment.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a question from the Pawpaw District Library about how you contain the mess. They say that their creative art maker cart basically explodes all over the floor every time. And we can definitely vouch for that. We go to the middle school and elementary school, and we have stuff all over. So how do you deal with that?
It's, I guess, discipline, and really just kind of always starting with the knowledge that, we started with a clean space, and it has to end up a clean space or we won't be allowed to be back. So it's really the kids are taught right from the beginning that they have to get things put back, and when they put it away and they organize it, of course, then they know exactly where everything is on the next time. So it's just, I really don't have a good answer other than discipline. Not like capital punishment or anything. Sure. just the appropriate mental discipline of doing it.
Mm-hmm. And I have some questions about the Guild of Makers as well, and just like how many weeks do the students stick with the projects? Are they working in one big group or a couple smaller groups?
So it really varies. We'll have, like we have this group of boys that they always start something together. They sit down and they decide this is what they want to do. And for the first 2 weeks, the 3 or 4 of them are focused, and then one drops off, 1 week, and then one will drop off the next week. But really, I think, it depends on the kids. Some of them, of course, won't stay with anything for more than, 30 minutes. But some of the groups will stick together and see a project through to some sort of completion, up to 4 weeks.
I got it. And you had spoken to us about some plans that you had for some longer term projects. Is that still in the works, or?
So we have, two of the high school boys who are really kind of the brains behind it to some extent. They're really kind of the passion amongst the kids. One thing that they want to do BPL Goes to Mars, and they want to incorporate all sorts of the kids and make this long project in a model of what a Mars colony would look like. And it's very extensive in their planning, in that obviously, you have all your physical needs and the logistics and the science behind, your air recycling and your water handling and all of these things. And, but then you're going into food production and even emotional needs and arts and psychological help. And I mean, it's taken this really far. And the goal is to, plan it for at the beginning of the school year, and at the end of the school year have a big science fair show and tell, and that the center of the room would be a model of their colony with some working components, but then everybody put something into it. So separate tables that would be like, here's some experiments that we've done with hydroponics for food production. Here's some philosophies on government and society that would have to be implemented. Over here would be fabric recycling and textile manipulation on extremely limited resources. So I mean, all these different components of any hands-on project you can imagine how it would be utilized in a Martian colony. So I mean, this is obviously a huge undertaking, and we'll see next year how if it gets off the ground. But that's the really big thing that they're trying to do.
And people in the chat were also wondering about the larger bench and its price point and where you had procured it.
The large bench was, I believe it was $400, and two separate donors actually stepped up and helped with that. And that came from Sam's Club. They have a whole line of really great heavy-duty benches like that. There's different benches and cabinets that they carry. I think you can actually get them on Walmart's website as well. I don't remember the brand name. The really cool thing about it, that bench in particular, it comes unassembled. So the first project with the bench was, they're the kids a pile of tools and they had to build it. So it was a bonus.
I think I just had one more question. You talked about the importance of partnership, but I wanted to know how you guys have managed. I know there are a lot. You mentioned the great volunteers, and I know you're a volunteer yourself. So what do you think it takes to get great volunteers into the library and to sort of catch that vision of what the library is doing?
I don't know what the magic answer is and how it happens. I think really anytime that there's just a real passion and a fire going on for any sort of activity, it gets people's interest. So I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. As long as the people see your passion, they're going to be drawn to it. We've reached out to certain individuals that we know have some particular skills and wrangled them in. but really, we've been very lucky just in the fact that our volunteers show up. We do have a lot of older volunteers, people that have been involved with the library for a long time, retirees who are very active and motivated, but they are the driving force. The vast majority of the volunteers are the retirees. So that's, will be more interesting to see how that all pans out in the next 10 or 20 years as to where our volunteer force is.
I think that's my final question. It's really exciting to see what you guys are doing in such a small community. You have a huge slate of activities. Kristin mentioned the newsletter that you guys send out, and it's a real inspiration every time it comes into my email inbox and I see what you guys are doing up there, and most of it without U of M's help. So we're really excited to be able to have partnered with you. I know that goes both ways, but
absolutely, we appreciate it, and it's just been amazing to have some help and guidance and a cheerleading section too sometimes when you're when you're working hard.
Yeah. Well, if no one's got any more questions for Jimmy, we'll go ahead and move to the final session where Kristin will wrap us all up here in the last 20 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much, Ben. Thanks, Jimmy. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. And I want to first of all thank everyone who's been here today. Of course, the one I want to share isn't available. Funny. So let me pull my screen up. The first thing is to let you know that that the archive, the slides, and the transcript will have up within 72 hours. So if you had to slip away at some point, one of the things I've really loved about this conference is that you see activities from a lot of different angles. So what happens when your patrons get old enough to go to university? What might it be like in a school? What are the kinds of questions that various people are working with? I also want to acknowledge that this is really the conference that Ben built. So thank you to Ben Rierick, our research assistant. I think what is so lovely is the way in which he has coordinated so many diverse voices, and it was just a personal pleasure to see so many people whose work we love and admire all in one place in a 4-hour time period. Just to summarize a couple of themes that we've heard repeatedly over the course of today is a lot of times when we start thinking about makerspaces, we think about the stuff we're going to buy. And so I think what you've heard overwhelmingly is that there can be other purposes for making. It can be about thinking skills. It can be about the pleasure of being in community and the pleasure of creation. It can be about play. That's something we definitely see in Jimmy's work, for example, is a real playfulness and the idea that some of the things that we played with as children are not the things that today's children are playing with, and the pleasure that comes out of play with recycled materials. You heard over and over about junk boxes, and people who know me know that I'm obsessed with having a junk box when we do maker work. But that idea of children making their own toys instead of choosing toys that are increasingly pre-programmed for them, and how important that is. Another theme we heard was that there was a lot of intentional work to build a sense of community. And you saw that as Pete was talking about his role in the larger school community at his high school. You heard that very strongly in Laura's at looking very acutely at details. And I highly recommend too, she showed you some charts of census data, really doing some demographic work. If you're from the state of Michigan, you know we have free access to Business Decision. It's a bit of a steep learning curve as a digital resource, but the ways in which it can point out people or trends in your community that you may not see walking in the door. We get very used to who's walking in the door. So where are the sort of untapped needs? Where are the folks who might need something from the library that isn't our traditional game of community? And I think you heard this phrase all through, that the things we purchase and the things we make available are really tailored to those particular groups. And I highly recommend that this is the way to build something that's sustainable over time. Nobody who's presented today has a 100% success rate, but over time you start to realize what works for these third graders might not work for the fourth graders, or what worked for fifth graders doesn't work with preschoolers. And the more we can refine those activities and connect to real needs and wants, the better. Some of you know that we like to quote our colleague here, Chuck Severance, who says that part of our goal is to identify people's pain points and then talk about how we can help take those pain points away, and thinking about how we position ourselves to solve the issues that our communities really have. And that's a really strong theme you heard in this session. And again, this idea of custom solutions for your community. What we often hear from beginning makers is, tell me what to buy, tell me how I can just have it in my collection. And as all makers mature and start to realize that there's real power in making those custom decisions, I think that's really what makes the difference for folks. And so I also want to challenge you and really think about, what is the impact of the work you're doing? Do you know how to define what success would look like? And how do you know you're reaching that success? If your success is to build STEM skills, what's the evidence that is happening in your community? If your goal is to keep kids who could be lured by drugs, how do you target activities that will give them other intriguing avenues to go down? And this is a part of librarianship that I think, especially in public libraries, is just coming into play. If you're not familiar with Project Outcome, I highly recommend you take a look at it to really get some beginning level materials that you can deploy immediately to start to measure that impact. So we move from just offering a lot of stuff to having some ability to say to stakeholders and millage voters and city government and schools, these are the ways in which we are making a marked stamp on our communities in positive ways. And a lot of us went into librarianship in part because we were not interested in statistics, but the Project Outcome stuff, and it's one of a variety of evaluation tools that are out there. Project Outcome is a free one, which is an added bonus, gives us a new way in which to communicate the things that matter to us. And then I think there's also questions, I think the maker movement has really sort of matured in libraries and schools in the past 3 years. And so we've sort of, in many ways, each library is settling into the types of work that are valuable. So in addition to asking this question about what's your impact, I hope you'll ask yourself the question, what comes next? One of the things that can happen is we end up doing a lot of work, say, in beginning coding. So we do a lot of work with Scratch and Blockly, and then we do Ozabot with Blockly, and then we do Dash and Dot robots with Blockly, and then we do another tool with Blockly. But still, we're keeping the skill level at that Blockly puzzle piece coding level. So we aren't actually building the skills, we're just introducing new tools to build the same skills. So is one of the goals to add complexity to help build that bridge between those starter visual programming languages and the kinds of programming languages that professionals do? I also want to urge you to think about entrepreneurship. Is one of our goals perhaps to really think about handmade and homemade as a way to be more intentional about how we can build small businesses? So Pam talked about the t-shirt press. That was actually a donation from someone who started with an Etsy shop and ended up opening a small store of their own. And now Pam has the opportunity, if other entrepreneurs want to come and think about that as a starter way. And this sometimes means we target audiences beyond youth. So we've heard a couple of examples. We saw the lamp making with the ladies in Benzonia. We see Laura's plans to work with adults. How do we take the excitement and enthusiasm that's being built with youth audiences? And I work with youth most of the time, so I know what an addictive group that can be to work with. Is there a need in our community that making can fill, whether that's an emotional need, a need to avoid loneliness, or a need to think about new career directions that now we can build beyond youth? And there aren't correct answers for that. There are just new ways of thinking about the questions that we ask of our community and how we play into that. And I think that's what's been a real pleasure about seeing all of these stories throughout, is that there are so many ways to think about what communities need. So I just want to let you know that you can reach us at these various places. We do keep stuff at makinglibraries.si.umich.edu, and that's where we'll post all of the resources from today. And if you've gotten something out of today, we hope you'll let other people know, because we think these are a really special set of voices and a really powerful set of voices that you've heard today. You can also reach us. Oops, I've got a wrong address on here, so let me change that. That'll teach me to make slides as we go through a presentation. We also keep our own Michigan Makers work at michiganmakers.si.umich.edu, and you can find Ben and me at Contact Michigan Makers at this email address, or you can find us on Twitter at these two sources. And we love to hear stories about what people are doing. Revisiting today is a reminder of how many times we've seen ideas in one space that we've brought into our work, or that we have recommended to someone else. And it was a real pleasure to see all of that, selfishly to see all of those little connections that we've been able to thrive from, and we hope that you will have the same experience. With all that being said, if there are not more questions, we will bring today's conversation to a close. So any final thoughts? I'm practicing my famous 10-second wait time that is a big instructional pillar at our school. All right, you know how to find us if you have any questions, and we'll work on processing the conference materials so that they're up on the website before the end of the week. We're motivated because it's going to be vacation for us at the end of the week. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks again to Ben for organizing everything, to Jean for being our remote assistant, and to all of you from around the state of Michigan for sharing your stories today. Have a great evening.